Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, the black and gold standard for Pittsburgh Steelers coverage. Now, here are your hosts, Joe Kuzma and Brian E. Roach.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. My name is Joe Kuzma, and the dynamic duo has rejoined forces here today to talk about a whole lot of stuff in an ugly game with an ugly finish that didn't have a whole lot going on until the final 8 seconds. But before we get to that, welcome back my brother from another mother, the host who doesn't like toast or probably some other people at this point. Hey, Mr. Brian E. Roach. Brian, aside from Myles Garrett, how's it going?
Just don't call me Robin.
You could be Nightwing.
Yeah, all right. Nightwing was kind of a punk too, but at least he wasn't wearing shorts.
Well, he was grown up. He wasn't a juvenile.
Yes.
Or you could always be like one of the other Robins. I think we've said this before. We may have actually used these analogies. You could be like, what is it? What was the one? The Todd, something Todd or whatever. The one
the Joker blew up?
Yes.
No, I don't want to be that. I don't want to be any Robin of any kind.
Well, okay then. We'll leave you with your Halloween costume where you dressed as Batgirl, and we'll leave it at that. So
that never happened.
Well, we do have. There was football to talk about. For once, we didn't have to wait forever to. Although it did feel like forever, yesterday throughout the day on Thursday. I'm like, can we just get to this game? I was so anxious, and we know how the game ended. We got other things to talk about the lead up to that. Otherwise, that'll probably be the only thing we talk about. And there are things to talk about in this game, good and bad, more probably on the negative side, especially when we get to talking about the offense. But first things first, the Steel City Underground podcast is brought to you by the FanDuel Sportsbook. So for those of you who took the under, congrats. We'll have some more on some special offers from them later as we go on through the show. Another little thing I want to throw out here, and I want to get to it in case anyone is listening this far in, and by anyone I mean Cleveland Browns fans. You could stop right now. You're probably not going to hear anything satisfying for your ears. And if I have you in the comments section acting like a bunch of jags or jag-offs, as we would call them, I'm just going to delete your comments. I may even flag you as spam, or if I can, block you from the channel. So I'm not dealing with this stuff. It was already, one of these things, Brian, where I'm looking at things all over the internet, and I get it. The Browns won for the first time in 5-6 years against the Steelers. They won at home. They won in primetime, Thursday night game. Yippee skippy, hooray, good for you, I'll give you that much. You won. The Steelers played an ugly game. So did the Browns in many cases, not just from, the dirty stuff either. It was a very, up and down kind of, or more downs. There wasn't as many peaks and valleys in this game. I don't think it was necessarily the sharpest or cleanest win that Browns fans could go and brag about. But hey, they got their first victory. It's been a long time. Hats off to you. But everything else, I'm not going to entertain it. There's a lot of ugly comments out there, and I already knew before all the stuff happened at the end of the game. I kind of already had this gut feeling that I'm going to have to deal with some of the trolls, and I know there's people that are out there that are Steelers fans. They're dealing with Browns fans who have been in hiding and witness protection for the last decade, and they're going to go run their mouths and just be, idiots. And that's just something that I'm not willing to accept here on our Steelers, website, podcast channel, et cetera, et cetera. So keep it clean in the comments, folks. I think if you have an open mind, you're still going to hear, we get called homers all the time, which we kind of wear as a badge of pride, right, Brian? But
absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, you may hear some things that are fair criticism here, and you're going to hear some things that are going to come from a point of view of, hey, we're Steelers guys. It's all there is to it. So just keep that in mind going forward here, because I'm going to start with this at least. I got two thoughts here for you, Brian. One was, when the schedule came out, did I or did I not say this game was set up for failure for the Steelers?
Yes.
Yes.
There's no question about that. No question.
Yeah. Thursday night game on the road. never really favors the away team. This is stuff that I said with the Professor Zach Meckler on the kind of post and pregame show on the short week on Monday. And coming off of playing a team that was the Super Bowl runner-up, that was also on a bye, and a very tough game that was a war. You were dealing with a team that was very fresh and you had to give your all. And you see guys start to drop like flies because of this, on both sides of the ball, really, too, the injuries and stuff. And I could see why players and coaches absolutely hate Thursday Night Football. I'm getting to a point where I don't like it either. I already felt sick to my stomach. And if you don't believe me on this storyline, let's flip it to the last few times the Steelers have had a Thursday night game and they played at home. They blew the doors off the Carolina Panthers last year. And that's kind of, what happens in these situations a lot of times. And I know people are going to say, well, the Browns had a short week too. Well, they played at home on Sunday. They were at home for this again. There's advantages to that, okay? And that's the reason why you usually don't see a visiting team do very well on these Thursday night games. And the Thursday night games are usually ugly because teams have not recovered. They're tired, they're sore, they're unprepared, and that's kind of the other thing I want to throw out here real quick. We'll get into more detail with it, but it really feels like whenever for me, my memories of the Steelers losing in Cleveland, playing at Cleveland, almost all involve not having Ben Roethlisberger. I understand there was the one game up there, and I was there for it, and it was the Lance Morris celebrating a touchdown when they were getting solidly beaten, and Ben threw a few picks and stuff like that. But the other ones were like Dennis Dixon, Charlie Batch, and now Mason Rudolph. And for a lot of these Steelers-Browns games over the last few years, you get used to, or we maybe got used to, where the Steelers were in a position of where they were playing a lot of backup players. Week 17, final game of the year, you got Landry Jones in there at quarterback. They were sitting a bunch of guys that were your starters, and that's almost what it felt like last night. Obviously, you don't have Ben. So you have Mason Rudolph on a short week to prepare, second-year quarterback, 7th ever start. You have James Conner was banged up. You lose him during the game. You lose other players such as Juju Smith-Schuster, Deontay Johnson, probably the wide receiver too, or at least that's the way everyone's been talking him up to this point. I mean, it felt almost like you didn't have all of these pieces out there, and it felt very much the same way as it had in those other games, with the exception of the Steelers didn't end up on the winning side of the scoreboard.
Yeah, you mentioned this at the top that Thursday night football games, and it goes a little beyond that for this particular team. It's 3 or 4 games in 18 days. It's just crazy. This is a rough part of their schedule in the sense of timing and the abuse you take and the time it takes to recover from playing games. There is no question, and I think history bears it out. If you go back and look at the road team on a Thursday night football game, it doesn't bode well. I get it. It's 130 miles. They didn't have to go there and stay. All of those things are true, but it is also true that, it's still the same. It's still a short week, and you're still not in your home confines. It always seems to come down on the side of the home team has an advantage there. That being said, what you saw yesterday is what happens when the defense isn't creating turnovers, when the defense isn't playing at their best the entire game. You saw a game that wasn't pretty,
yeah,
by any stretch of the imagination, regardless of how it ended, which is going to be what everybody talks about from this game moving forward. But it just, it's very, very clear. It's even hard to say. It's not, the Steelers didn't come in under a full complement of players, right? You talked about Ben being gone, and we know that. We knew that going in. But we kind of hoped, okay, we might have James Conner, and we find out James Conner really wasn't 100%, re-injured his shoulder, he's out. Then you lose Juju to a concussion. Then you lose Deontay Johnson to a concussion. You lose other guys, Ola gets lost to a knee, I think, at a position where they're already thin, an outside linebacker. because Anthony Chickillo didn't even dress for the game. It just, I said this many times during the game, but I really, we remember the heatedness between the Bengals and the Steelers, during Vontaze Burfict's heyday, right?
Yes.
But I'll tell you, I guess, who was it? Demarius Randall, is that who got ejected?
Yes.
For the hit. And he throws a hissy fit because he get ejected. But the more you look at that hit, the more you look at what was happening to Juju. And on Juju's play, Mason gets hit in the head at the same time. The Browns really didn't look like a team that was just trying to play football. They looked like a team that was trying to inflict damage. I mean, those were not clean hits in my mind. I mean, you just don't hit guys in the head that many times and not be sort of trying to do it. It was an ugly game throughout, and we'll break down some stuff, and I'm sure we'll see if our last conversation about Mason Rudolph carries over into this conversation about Mason Rudolph.
Yes and no. And I mean, most people who know me or have listened to this program for a while know that I used to call Landry Jones the GOAT. So don't expect me to throw Mason Rudolph under the bus necessarily. There was some ugly stuff there, but once again, the young man is getting no help from anyone else. And of course,
agreed.
Some of the headhunting that was going on was of no help either. We'll look at that big, larger picture here in a few moments, Brian, because that's definitely something that I was going to say too. The overall vibe is that's the reason the game ended the way it did, and I didn't have the greatest feeling. I forgot to mention this on the pregame. I saw that Clete Blakeman was the referee. Clete Blakeman is responsible for some of the most dumbfounded and just brutal games. He's been involved with a lot of the Baltimore Ravens and Pittsburgh Steelers games. I believe he may have been the referee on the Mike Tomlin on the field deal that happened many years ago. No, he was, I believe even Clete Blakeman may have been involved. No, I'm sorry. There was someone else but he's been involved in Bengals-Steelers games too. For whatever reason, they put him on. I guess he's one of the more tenured guys. I believe he's also worked a Super Bowl, but he's had some of the most bizarre stuff happen in his games, and he always gets involved in these divisional games that end up with crap happening. I don't know if the officials could have done anything to really prevent or curb this, to be completely honest. The way that we'll analyze each of those things, but it's just, he was also the guy with the Steelers and Bears a few years ago where there was the missed or blocked field goal and then the ball that rolls in the end zone and is touched and whatnot, and trying to sort all of that stuff out. I don't know what you do there. Then your head starts spinning. Well, this subsection of the rule book does this. So I get it from that kind of aspect. There were a few other things in this game that we'll talk about officiating wise too that are just mind-boggling. I guess we could really start off when you look at this game. Steelers get the ball first, okay? Let me see. I'm trying to get over here. Of course, I knew it was a 3 and out, but I was trying to see a minute and a half basically of time before you get the guys out there. It was James Conner stopped short, loses a yard. James Conner gains a yard. Mason Rudolph throws a pass out of bounds or wherever it went. He didn't have anybody, just got rid of it, and they punt. And then you have the Steelers defense give up the huge 43-yard play. It didn't end up it was called a touchdown on the field. It was reviewed with the video replay and overturned, and then it just ended up being a Baker Mayfield sneak, of which he was stopped initially. And it's like, you just keep things going, I guess. I don't know. I always try to figure this. I can never figure this out with the quarterbacks. It's why I'm going to say this too, and I believe I've said it before. It's why Lamar Jackson has such an advantage right now, because the quarterbacks wear skirts in most cases, unless you're Mason Rudolph, apparently. And it's like, or Ben, we've had these same criticisms with Ben too. And it's just, I don't know. It's like for certain guys, it's like, when can you hit him? When can't you hit him? And things of that nature. You know what I mean? But, he ends up leaning over after being initially having his progress stopped, and he gets that touchdown. And, it's kind of hard to stop somebody from a yard out anyway. So I'm not going to cry spilled milk over it. That's just my observation or feelings on that position. And obviously, obviously the Steelers losing a game to the Ravens because of a roughing the passer call kind of justifies what I'm talking about here, because it wasn't a roughing the passer, right? Steelers, let me see. They get a little bit of stuff going here on the second possession. Let me see, 7 plays. They only get about 30 yards on it. You're handicapped. This is the thing I said about not helping your quarterback out. Alejandro Villanueva, along with a lot of the rest of the offensive line, did not have their best day. You had Pouncey with like a bad snap or two at different points. You had Big Owl get an offensive holding penalty on the second drive. They got bailed out on a defensive pass interference, which was, I'm going to say most of for the calls that were called, I'm going to say that they were, there's no doubt about it. I don't think there was anything that was iffy or really questionable as far as, illegal contact, hands to the face, the holding, the pass interference, the ones that were called. I think there were a few that were missed too, but I'm going to say that those calls, they were on the money. You know what I mean? You see the replay and you're like, you can't even complain about it like normal. You know what I mean? You had James Conner moving a little bit in this one, and then Boswell misses a 44-yard field goal, which is starting to signify the collapse and the long night for Steelers Nation, because now it's like, well, they finally went and did something, and bad snap. There's no doubt about it. That wasn't on Boswell, and he still tried to get something out of it, and Barry tried to get it down. I mean, it did not happen. It was not working. So that's a little different than, let's say, the Browns kicker, who was just terrible last night. I have no idea what was going on there. I get one was a 50-yarder, but it was like they went out and attempted a 50-yarder after he missed a 45-yarder. I'm not sure I would have done that myself personally. You're either going to go for it or you're going to punt. You know what I mean? But, hey, that's Freddie Kitchens. What can I say? Steelers, the rest of their first quarter was fairly ugly. They're playing the field position game here because the Browns get a little bit of chunks. They're getting the ball off of punts or whatever. They're getting maybe better field position. They may pick up a first down here or there. And then the Steelers end up starting, they start under 20. You have, let's see, James Conner picks up a few yards again. You got Mason Rudolph connecting with Juju for a few yards. And a lot of these passes, there's not a lot that's backing this defense up. And I guess, the biggest thing when you take a look at this entire first quarter is the Odell Beckham play. Steven Nelson kind of by themselves. I don't know if the concept was to completely man up, try and stop the run or what it was, but, Steven Nelson has been fantastic this year. I don't really want to throw him under the bus either because you're still guarding Odell Beckham. You're still guarding a guy, former first-round draft pick, all-pro, I don't want to say perennial All-Pro, but he's been an All-Pro or Pro Bowl player multiple times over and has been one of the top wide receivers in the league, even though he may not be having the most phenomenal statistic year with the Cleveland Browns right now and working in whatever, new system, new team, offense, etc. It's still a guy that's maybe not the easiest guy to cover, especially when you don't have any help. So I'm not going to throw Nelson under the bus for that, but for all intents and purposes, that's the play that pretty much set the tone for 3/4 of this game, maybe the entire game, putting the Steelers behind 7-0. We're pretty much right out the gate.
Yeah, that particular play, and people are going to be annoyed because I'm not necessarily throwing him under the bus. He made a mistake, but this shows us that Minka is human. He bid on the play action on the fake. Probably should have been back there. It certainly looked like Nelson thought he had safety help over the top. He did not. And that's because Minka was up, buying into into the run fake. They made a couple mistakes. I mean, look, people oftentimes claim they don't look prepared, but it's not so much that they didn't look prepared, and when you look at the defensive side of the ball, overall, the defense played a decent game. It doesn't look like it because they gave up 21 points, but they made a couple mistakes on pass plays. Joe Hayden I think covering whoever it was the second time around. Somebody it was Mike Hilton. Sorry, don't want to blame Joe Hayden for that. It was Mike Hilton covering Hodges, whoever that guy is.
Yeah, Hodges.
and So they made a couple of mistakes. That happens. But for the most part, they did a good job of shutting down the Browns offense, keeping Nick Chubb in check for the most part, even though he had a couple of decent runs. The defense wasn't the issue really in this game. And the last touchdown I can kind of give away because, of course, that's the one where the offense gave the Browns the ball on the 8-yard line.
An early Christmas gift.
Yeah. This has been a repeated theme over the past few games. The defense is not the problem. The difference in this game is the defense didn't create turnovers. They lost the turnover battle badly yesterday. The defense didn't create any turnovers. They barely, and this is unfathomable to me. I don't get it. And if I'm not mistaken, I don't believe there was a single holding penalty called on the Browns yesterday offensively. But, with that offensive line, the Steelers got 1 sack. Am I right? 1?
Yeah, I do believe that's correct. I got it here. If you give me 1 second. Yep, TJ. That was it.
Yeah. And, they weren't perfect in their containment. They let, Mayfield get out of the pocket, going to the right every single time. When they finally adjusted to that slightly at the end of the game, he found another way. So it was his mobility and elusiveness that got them. But to me, a lot of that, I saw holding left and right in there. Of course, there's holding on every play, but not to have not a single call go that direction. When I will tell you that I thought one of the calls on Al Villanueva was questionable. The others were legit, but one was definitely questionable. You talked about the refs; they stink. I'm going to say it. They stink. Look, I can't remember a time when I saw pass interference called on both guys in the same play.
Oh, that's coming. That's coming, man. That was one of the most bizarre things I've ever seen in my life. And just to fill in there, the only holding call on Cleveland was actually on special teams.
Yeah, and look, that if you're going to call that pass interference, right, then the play where Johnny Holton. And they just, I guess, as I think it was Troy Aikman said, I guess they're just tired of throwing PI flags. I understand their offense became the Joe Flacco offense. Throw the ball down to Johnny Holton deep and hope a penalty gets thrown. They were...
Well, you know why that is. It's the same...
Oh, I know, because they had nobody left either.
Well, it's not only that. It's the same thing with Flacco. His guys couldn't catch the football, nor could Johnny Holton.
Yeah, no. He did catch one ball, and that was he caught a ball, and then immediately Mason threw an interception.
Yeah, I adjusted my TV set when that happened. By the way, targeted 7 times.
Yeah,
7. And through the season, hold on, I'm going to pull this up too. Let me see. This PFR. This may not be updated with yesterday's information yet, but it was 1 for 13 targets. That's mind-blowing. Let me see if they did get yesterday's stats in. Yeah, they did. So previously, he had been targeted twice against the Patriots, once against the Seahawks. You didn't see him really again. Once against the Ravens, once against the Chargers, and once against the Colts, and didn't catch any of those passes, and didn't catch all but one of the 7 yesterday either. That's just... you talk about DHB having some stone hands. This is the guy that essentially replaced DHB on special teams because he's fast. He's faster, quicker than a hiccup, as they would say. And he can't catch the ball. I mean, what else can you say?
Yeah, there's really not any question about it. I mean, when you look at it, he's not good at football.
I mean, there's a reason why. How many teams has he been on previously? Like 4? Various practice squads and everything. I know that the Raiders were one of them. Let me see. He was undrafted in 2016. He was with the Raiders for a few years. The Eagles, he was on their practice squad. And then Well, that was earlier this year. They signed him to a reserve futures contract, and then he got dumped in May. And then the Steelers went after him, brought him to camp, and I thought he looked good initially in camp. I think he got banged up, and then I was like, I'm totally done with this. But for all intents and purposes, too, for the whole fire Dante Moncrief crowd that's out there, who would you rather have? I mean, you got a guy who had like a busted hand. I understand you want the comp pick. I totally get it in the sense of business and, the business of football, and the Steelers already, mortgaging part of their future here with the upcoming draft, that you want that extra pick, especially it should be high based on Le'Veon Bell, based on nothing else, goofy occurring with the whole formula there as far as acquiring free agents and where years go and what contracts they sign and whatnot. But I totally get that. But Johnny Holton, I mean, I just want to bang my head against the desk, man. There are several passes that should have been caught. Dare I said, if it's Juju, those are probably caught. And dare I say his, he who shall not be named, 84, the big checks, big chest, big head, probably never going to play again or whatever, going crazy. If he was out there, he's catching some of these passes, no doubt. And I think we're spoiled and forget that. And now everybody piles on the quarterback for that reason. Granted, there's a couple of throws that were bad by Rudolph, but for the most part, Brian, he was running for his life yesterday. This offensive line, I don't know what else to say about the offensive line. You get into the second quarter, Villanueva already has his second offensive holding penalty on a 2nd and 7. Then you got 2nd and 17, and the best you could do now is Rudolph connects with Vance McDonald, and this is one of the passes he tries deep, incomplete to Johnny Holton, and they end up punting. They were at their 20. You get Jordan Berry's probably the brightest spot in this entire game. A 57-yard punt from him at least sends Cleveland back to their 23. But then this is the one here where there was the big connection. It was initially they missed the down by contact with Mike Hilton getting his foot or whatever. This was the aforementioned play that you just referenced, where Hilton got beat pretty bad. It seemed like maybe they weren't sure of who was supposed to be covering who at that point. That's the whole reason teams design plays, right? I mean, stuff like that happens. And there was confusion and dunzo. And then, of course, right after that, you have Jarvis Landry wide open, too, for 25 yards. Nick Chubb, who I said, hey, I like Nick Chubb. I don't have anything against him, really. Fine player, right? Hard runner. You get to the 3rd and 7, and Joe Hayden commits the worst pass interference call that I've seen all season. The most obvious pass interference. You cannot defend that this was pass interference. It looked like he was trying to have like a little hoedown or a dancing contest with who was it for? Oh, this Hodge. I don't even know Hodge's first name. He's a guy, Let me see. I'm going to look him up just so I can. Maybe we should call him Minica or Martavius. Oh, man. Cordero Hodge. That's right. Cordero Hodge. So it's like, of all players, this isn't like you're trying to defend OBJ or Jarvis Landry. You know what I mean? This is a guy that we hadn't even heard of, and he's ascended the depth chart due to injuries and due to Antonio Callaway being not smart, so him being released off the team for the Cleveland Browns, that is. So I don't understand. What are you doing, Joe? They're kicking a field goal there. If you don't do this little, hoedown or whatever you're trying to do, I just cannot. Brian, I want to swear on this show. Yeah. This is the reason why we didn't do it, right after the game. It was like, let's have a little rest period. Let's sleep on it at least. But then it made it easy. It was once again first and goal from the 1, and Jarvis Landry left wide open. I think they were trying to send the house at Baker Mayfield, and it didn't work. And it wouldn't have mattered anyways because McCullers would have got called for illegal use of hands on top of it. So it was just up to this point where the Browns score with about 10 minutes left in the second quarter. It looks like a monumental collapse by the Steelers. And I think, oh, dear Lord, this is going to be an ugly blowout. And I'm going to want to bury my head in the sand like an ostrich and not look at anybody for a few days.
Yeah, there's a lot for me to unpack with this. Look, I get that the offensive line has played poorly. They've not played poorly. They've played bad, and last night was probably the worst example of it. They looked outmatched yesterday. They couldn't open holes in the run game. The running backs didn't run smart for the most part. You got a guy, and I don't know whether this is the show to talk about it or not, but you do have to start to question the stable of running backs that they have. I love James Conner, but James Conner can't stay on the field and hasn't been able to any season that he's been in the NFL. The question becomes, where do we go from there? Jalen Samuels, in my view, looks like he's taken steps backwards this season as opposed to forwards. But is it all on them? I don't know, because the offensive line has played so badly. This offensive line that used to be so good, and whether that has to do with, eventually plugging in guys like Matt Filer into a group, whether it's that Ramon Foster is now long in the tooth, I don't know, or Al Villanueva is becoming the guy he really is, because, we all said he's a serviceable tackle, but he's not the best. I don't know. I don't know what's going on, but man, they have been bad. Nonetheless,
I have a theory.
Okay.
Real quick. They jumbled this offensive lineup to play the Rams and to try and contain Aaron Donald. You had B.J. Finney wasn't a part of it whatsoever. You moved Filer to guard and had Chuck's Okorafor playing at tackle, and now you go on 3 days after that game, which was a late afternoon game, no less. You have 4 days, but you're basically like a practice or two and a walkthrough to get it back in sync. The guys hadn't played together like that, and they had lost Ramon Foster previously, so I think it was a little bit of rust. That's what I'm going to say there.
Yeah, I'm sure it was a little bit of rust. But again, this is a group, take Filer out of the mix, but that has played together for many years. So, and they haven't looked good at any point during this season. And I tweeted this earlier yesterday too. Look, I'm just not ready to give Mason Rudolph a full pass because he makes bad decisions. And the decisions that he oftentimes makes, he stares guys down. He doesn't make reads. He's not examining all of his options. If he was, there are guys that are open at times, and he just misses them more than he should. I'm not seeing, and we had this conversation in the back rooms, I'm not seeing growth, and I'm not seeing a guy who has what it takes to be a quality NFL starter. And I'm just not. And it doesn't mean I don't still wish him the best, and I hope that changes over the next set of games, because I do. He's still our quarterback, and I still want him to do well. But, man, I'm questioning what I'm seeing. And when you throw 4 picks, even though one of them was a great play by Ward that pops the ball up and allows it to be intercepted, that ball shouldn't have been thrown. The couple of third downs, and God, we have to talk about how bad this team is on 3rd and 1 and 4th and 1. That he targets Samuels and either throws the ball on the inside shoulder where Schobert can easily get a hand on it and knock it away, instead of targeting it towards the outside where he's leading the player. He has a hard time leading guys. And while that's not an exact science, and you've said Ben will do it sometimes, everybody throws behind guys. But, man, he does it more consistently than most guys I've seen. Yesterday it cost him because he threw a ball behind somebody, it got intercepted. He overthrew guys, and they got intercepted. And I get, he was under duress, but one of the worst throws he made yesterday, he had time, he set his feet, he looked like he had good mechanics, and he throws it nowhere near the receiver and into the ground. I just don't see a lot of improvement here. Let me put it that way. And so that concerns me. And this offense is just flat out bad right now.
Well, hold on. I want to say the one that got thrown in the ground, he's getting bumped and banged. I believe at least on the one, Trey Edmonds had his lunch stolen from him. I forget by who. Maybe this Chad Thomas, who's he's a rookie. He's playing in place of Olivier Vernon. We don't have a whole lot to go on with him. He could end up a fine NFL player. He could end up a bum for all we know. But he owned Edmonds, and it looked like there wasn't a whole lot, I think, highlighted on the broadcast about how much tip passes, or more or less Rudolph just getting bumped into, hit, arm hit, this, that, and the other thing. He was definitely under duress for probably, I would say, all but the beginning of the third quarter, which was their smoothest series. He actually had some time and was finding people and getting off some cleaner passes. The other thing I'm going to say about this is guys got to help him. These drop passes, if they aren't drops, if you have, like the previous few weeks, you have those pass interference or offensive pass interference calls against Deontay Johnson, or you have Tevin Jones or Johnny Holton come up with one of these balls, I don't think we're saying all of these things necessarily about Mason Rudolph. We'd be like, okay, a little shaky, but now it's all of a sudden it's all on him. When, remember when Ben said this about guys, like this is the first thing I thought of too watching this game was too big for the moment. That was the AFC Championship game with, they were rolling with Jesse James at tight end. You had Kobe Hamilton and Sammy Coates and probably DeMarcus Ayers or somebody like that at that time. No, maybe Ayers wasn't drafted yet. I'm trying to think who else that they had. Because Antonio Brown wasn't in that game. Is that right? Or was Antonio Brown there? I think Antonio Brown wasn't in that game. I'm trying to remember. But anyways, they had like a bunch of castaways playing as their wide receivers. And I am going to place some of the blame, at least, on the wide receivers. The play with Denzel Ward, it's like, okay, that was banged up. It gets tipped and it's getting picked, and you have a few picks like that already. Dante Moncrief and Juju Smith-Schuster. Mason comes in the game with 4 picks, and you got 2 of those at least that were tipped balls. And somebody said we need a statistic for interceptions that are catchable balls. Because when you're in the NFL, what's a catch radius? It's not like every single pass that Mason's making is uncatchable. This isn't like, who else was there out there that I was watching this year? Like Luke Falk with the Jets. Absolutely terrible. There was no way his guys were getting anywhere near the ball, although Steelers offense resembled that closely yesterday. It was kind of, it was bad. It was definitely, I'm not going to say that the offense was great by any means, but I have this like gut feeling too that the game plan was to run the ball more effectively and better than they did, and that they kind of crapped the bed on that when James Conner went back out of the game. And then all of a sudden it's like, well, we forgot how to pass protect. It's just, I don't know. I'm sorry. Antonio Brown was in that game, but the other guys were Eli Rogers, Kobe Hamilton, Sammy Coates, Darius Hayward-Bay, and then that was the game, of course, Le'Veon Bell got hurt and very similarly crapped the bed because now all of a sudden they couldn't really run the football then either. And, I'm jumping around here, but I'm going to get back. You got a little ahead of me on we were on the Baker Mayfield touchdown. You had, Juju Smith-Schuster get knocked out on the next series on 3rd and 4. That ball was delivered basically he was almost like triple covered, and Mason Rudolph was also hit in the helmet at the same time. So Juju gets knocked out of the game. That one I'm not going to be like, okay, Browns are dirty, get rid of all these guys. It was like kind of a bang-bang. There was a whole bunch of things going on there, guys trying to knock the ball loose, playing aggressive. I got a word I'm trying to think, like undisciplined, I think is a word that's going to fit very well for the Cleveland Browns defense as we continue forward from this point, because certainly undisciplined. And I guess the penalty flags were thrown. This is odd. I'm reading the game book. It says Mason Rudolph, pass incomplete, short middle, Juju Smith-Schuster. It says the guys that are covering him, Juju Smith-Schuster, or Jay Smith-Schuster was injured during the play, period. He is out, period. I guess they have to put that in there for injury or insurance purposes. I don't know that I've read that in an NFL game book as part of the play-by-play that you run through here. But there was the roughing the passer, the 15 yards that the Steelers got off of that. They lived the fight for some more downs. And then there was the stupid illegal formation. They had 2nd and 3. It becomes 2nd and 8. He connects with Nick Vannett. Vannett can't gain that extra yard to get to the sticks. 3rd and 1. Trey Edmonds comes in the game. Here's the point I wanted to make. Maybe, I don't remember if myself and Zach talked about this in the last episode, but anytime you see Zach Banner, a combination with Zach Banner and Johnny Holton come out on the field, or with Trey Edmonds particularly, it's going to be a run. This is on film. This is not even guesswork. I knew it's coming, and it happened multiple times, and each time the Browns shut it down. Does not take a genius. And when you have Steve Wilkes as a defensive coordinator who's been around the block, he sees that the personnel that comes out, and it's like, this is going to be a run play. Throw the kitchen sink at it. It was like, can you do anything else besides that? And they go for it on 4th and 2, and that was the bad pass that Mason couldn't connect with. Vance McDonald hurried, whatnot. That was just a mess, and even then, I believe it was either this one or the other 4th down that they went for it. There was someone on a very shallow crossing route, just right where you needed a line of gain there for the 1st down that I think Mason missed. It had to be a quicker pass, and it wasn't, and I think that was a problem. And these are things that need to be worked on and or corrected. Again, 7th start for this guy. I'm still going to take him over a lot of other people that are backups and or playing, including Brian Hoyer. Because, Brian Hoyer, has had how many opportunities and played and started in the NFL, and he's no better than, I think, Mason Rudolph at this point either. So the defense, they hold their bargain, man. They hold up their bargain. They get a 3 and out. They force the Browns to punt. The Steelers get the ball. This is the flea flicker that turns into the interception on this drive. Browns end up returning it a good spell, 43 yards. They get the ball at the Steelers' 30, and the Steelers' defense holds up their deal again. This is a missed 45-yard field goal by Austin Siebert. And now the Steelers get the ball ahead of the 2-minute warning. You're thinking, hey, they're starting to get some things going here. You got a 1st and 10, and then all of a sudden Mason Rudolph is sacked. There was a fumble. It's recovered by Matt Filer. They lose 14 yards at 2nd and 24. There's an incomplete pass. Then that's to Deontay Johnson. Then there's Mason Rudolph gets sacked yet again, and this was Chad Thomas on this play. They end up out of field goal range. They were at the 28, and they end up at their own 48. That is just, pretty much unacceptable. And then, of course, the Browns run the ball twice, and we go into halftime. Steelers down 14-0.
Yeah, I just want to clarify. The pass that I was talking about, he was absolutely not touched. He stepped up in the pocket, set his feet, threw what looked like a great ball just to nobody.
I'm gonna have to find which one that was. I have a feeling that I know what you're talking about on that too, and you got to wonder if he's expecting someone to break in, break out, and things of that nature too. Again, when you have something like that and you're inexperienced, I know you're more down on him than I am, because you know what? I saw something in Landry Jones, okay? And a lot of people, they had the pitchforks and torches out on that. I think Mason is 100 times better than Landry Jones and has that potential. But, you've seen Ben miss people too. I think the biggest difference is
everybody does it.
Everybody does it, but Ben's been around 13 years, and you've seen all kinds of other things that Ben's done, so you're willing to be like, okay, yeah, something happened there, and we smile and chuckle and wave it off. This guy, it's like, get rid of him, get somebody else, get Duck Hodges in there, and oh, dear Lord, please, that wasn't going to be any better.
That's not where I am.
I know,
and I fully accept that there is not a single individual on that offense that is stepping up to help this kid out. So it's not all on him, but I do have to look at what he's doing. It's that offense is just a hot mess. It just is. Because again, I don't think there's anybody that's playing really well on the offensive side of the ball. DeCastro has played okay, but that gets lost. People are talking about Pro Bowl voting, and I got asked several times the other day who on the Steelers makes the Pro Bowl. And on the offensive side of the ball, maybe DeCastro makes it. Maybe. And it might be on name recognition more than anything else, but maybe he makes it. But even though he's had a season where at times he's looked very solid, throw out the game against Aaron Donald because everybody looks bad against Aaron Donald. But you throw that out and it doesn't matter because he's overshadowed by how bad the rest of the offensive line has played consistently. But beyond him, there's not a single player who deserves even Pro Bowl consideration. And I mean, I voted for them because I always vote black and gold, so it doesn't matter. I'm going to go vote for all of them.
You voted for Mason?
I did.
He still has a shot the way the Pro Bowl voting's been going, Trevor Siemian played in a Pro Bowl. Andy Dalton played in a Pro Bowl recently.
But even doing it, I realize they don't deserve that vote. That none of them do.
Well, thank you for skewing everything and screwing it up, Brian.
I like to. Look, I don't like anybody else. and you might call this tough love because I like all my Steelers, regardless of who they are, as long as they're wearing the black and gold. Once they go crazy, like what's his face, I don't. I'm done with them. But the guys who are here, I love them all, and I will support them and vote for them. But it doesn't mean like I've said many times to people, you still have to be honest about things. And in me being honest, Mason Rudolph just doesn't look like he's getting better to me. And I get it that it's hard to tell because of the way the offense is playing. But I watched last night especially him simply not make reads and throw to guys who are clearly covered. And the pressure and everything else is there, but he just gets laser focused, and that's going to once everybody in the league catches on to that, that's going to doom him until he starts to make his check or his reads, his breakdowns, and people, as I said to somebody last night, people have been wanting him to push the ball down the field. How are we feeling about that?
Well, and it would help if somebody
for him to push to,
catch the ball.
Look, I get it. It's not just because Mason is making horrible throws or anything like that. It's the whole package. How you feeling about this pushing to downfield when you got guys like Johnny Holton who can't catch a cold, and you've got essentially nobody out there who is helping this kid out. Until they've and again, I don't know whether this is an identity issue or whether it's just because nobody is making that step forward. There is no identity on this team on the offensive side of the ball. Whatever it is, until somebody starts to make their self stand above, this offense is going to be in trouble. And against a decent defense or a halfway decent defense or a good defense, they're going to look like they did last night. Against, bad defenses, they may look okay.
And you know what? I'm of the camp that I wanted Mason to have kind of a game like this. I think they needed a rough game to reset, and you need to fail in order to learn. I'm a firm believer in that. So I'm not exactly, I don't know. For me, I'm not bent out of shape because I would have liked something different than the way things panned out. It was almost my expectation of how things were going to play out on the short week and being on the road and having a young guy. But all the injuries was what was really making me get real disgusted throughout that game. But before I get to that, Brian, we have a second half to talk about and not a whole lot of time to talk about it, but we have some key points to probably bring up. But first, we want to mention that the Steel City Underground podcast is brought to you by the FanDuel Sportsbook. And they are offering a $500 risk-free bet to new users. And while that risk-free bet is an amazing deal, it's just the beginning. FanDuel Sportsbook has tons of other awesome promos happening all of the time. On any given day, you can find odds boost, bet insurance, special bonuses, and more. Plus, their new cash-out feature makes it easy to take your winnings early. As the game goes on, you get updated offers to cash out your bet before the game ends. So if you have a feeling that your team's about to blow their lead, which we were all hoping for, right? You can just cash out and take your winnings right then and there. There are tons of sports to choose from too, and FanDuel offers some of the most competitive lines around. And this weekend in the NFL is no different, even though maybe it's a little easier without the emotional attachment involved. But there's some crazy ones here. Bills and Dolphins. You got the Dolphins plus 6.5. You got the Lions plus 6.5. You got the Broncos plus 10.5 against the Vikings. You got an over/under on the Ravens Texans of 51.5. Let me see what other ones were big here. The Cardinals are getting 10.5 against the 49ers. You got the Bengals getting 11.5 against the Raiders with a 48.5 over/under, no less. Like, they think the Raiders are going to drop like 40 on the Bengals, apparently. Patriots-Eagles has a little bit smaller of a line. The Eagles are an underdog by 3.5 at over-under at 45 even. And then the other big one is the Chiefs-Chargers has an over-under of 52.5. So there's some firepower out there on this weekend's games. Oh, by the way, the Lions were getting laid 6.5 to the Cowboys too, and it's like. And they're at home. I don't know how to feel about that. People say, how about them Cowboys? And I kind of laugh at them, I'm going to make fun of the Cowboys since I really shouldn't say anything about the Browns, but we're going to have more to say about the Cleveland Browns here in a few moments. But just to let you know some more about the FanDuel Sportsbook, you can place a $500 risk-free bet on any of these games that we mentioned. Might be easier. It depends on how much money I guess you put on it. Maybe you don't get as stressed out or frustrated as watching the Steelers-Browns game from Thursday night. But if you go to place a bet, don't forget the promo code SCU. Signing up is simple. It's easy to add your money to your account or withdraw your winnings whenever you want. Just download the app to bet from anywhere, particularly in New Jersey or Pennsylvania, but be sure to visit the site and see what else may be available there for you as well, folks that aren't residing in those two states. Don't forget to sign up using that promo code SEU and make your first bet within 7 days. If you lose, FanDuel Sportsbook will give you a refund and site credit of up to $500. So download the FanDuel Sportsbook app now by visiting sportsbook.fanduel.com to claim your risk-free bet. That's up to $500, once again, with the promo code SCU. This is on your first online wager only. Refund issued as site credit. Site credit expires after 14 days. Go to sportsbook.fanduel.com for full terms and conditions. Must be 21 or older and present in New Jersey or Pennsylvania or wherever else legal. Gambling problem, don't forget, if you got one, call 1-800-GAMBLER. So, that was...
Wait.
What's
Yeah, I got to tell you, here's my call, and it's not a pro game.
Oh, okay.
It's not a pro game.
Okay.
But I'll be there tomorrow on Saturday. I'll be there at Rutgers University, Ohio State Rutgers. 52.5 point spread. Take the Buckeyes. Over under 61.5. Take the over. I'm just saying, okay? You want my pick of the week? That's my pick of the week. The Buckeyes plus the 50 or minus the 52.5 and take the over because the game is already over and it hasn't even started.
Yeah, if Rutgers wins the coin toss, it'll be the only thing they win, right?
Yeah.
So, we're already up against it. Let me see if we can get to some key points here. All that other stuff was good to paint the picture. The Steelers' offense was even worse in the second half. Obviously, they did get one decent drive that chewed up some time that was aided by a lot of penalties. But the defense, once again, they kind of do their job. They get the Browns to punt because the Browns got the ball first. You could hear the boo birds starting to matriculate there in First Energy Stadium. They weren't happy necessarily with their own play calling. This was also you had a few of these plays too where we should really talk a lot more about the Steelers defense because let's just throw it out there. Cam Hayward, grown ass man. TJ Watt,
oh yeah,
grown-ass man. Those two in particular, Bud Dupree had a few big, man, he had some huge plays too. These guys were coming through and making the plays where necessary. There were some plays in the secondary too, even though guys got beat like Steven Nelson or Mike Hilton, they redeemed themselves at different times. They were getting the ball back, and they were rattling Baker. They didn't get to him. He's mobile. He was moving out of the pocket. That was more irritating. You felt like TJ was going to get his hand on the ball at any moment, and he didn't. And pretty much if it's anyone else, I believe he does. And, I don't know, the Steelers, I don't know how much you could say about fresh players and rotations and things of that nature. But, and also Isaiah Buggs, thank you for sprinting onto the field. Almost the penalty. I can't believe he got there. But
I was impressed.
Yeah, the ensuing Steelers drive to open up the third quarter right after the Browns punt. They run 4 plays and throw a pick to Tevin that was intended for Tevin Jones. That was to Joel Schobert. And it just, I don't know, man. It just sucks. I don't know what else you could do. But once again, Steelers defense forces a 3-and-out right after that. What else can you ask for? So then the very first play is the one where Deontay Johnson gets absolutely rocked. It was late, helmet down, could have been avoided. Ball was long gone. I don't know what Demarius Randall was thinking. I don't have anything else to say about it except that it was dirty and deserved an ejection. He'll probably get a fine. I don't know about suspension, as I think other things are going to overshadow that we're going to talk about. But Demarius Randall, I think the ejection was worthy by all means. I'm like, this has no place in the game of football. It was dirty.
Yeah, look, the Browns, whether it's undisciplined play, whether it's something else, I don't know what it is. But they sure looked like a dirty team yesterday. It's not something I would have said, but, I did keep thinking to myself, did Vontaze Burfict change jerseys, find a way to change his name and somehow sneak back into a stadium and find himself on the Browns? Because it's that kind of crap that they were pulling yesterday. Look, it was... I don't know whether it's time to go to the piece de la resistance or not, but it was a progression, right? Juju gets knocked out with the concussion on helmet-to-helmet hits. Mason gets hit in the head the same play, and then later on, as you said, Deontay Johnson gets knocked out, is bleeding from his ear, which I think is probably more scary sounding than it actually is because of where he got hit, and could have some damage to the inner part of the ear from the helmet that probably isn't, impactful long term, but is scary to think of.
Yeah, he's not bleeding from his brain. That's just
right.
from all the medical people that we know. Even I was thinking that. I'm like, that would be like something out of a horror film.
Yeah, exactly. But then you get to the horror film, at the end of this game, and I guess, look, there's not much else to say. It was an ugly game. The Browns, won at home. But as many fans were saying after the game, and I'll give them credit, they won, and yet it felt like a loss. And it will end up being not a loss in the win column for them, but a loss long-term for them because of what happened at the end of the game during those last 8 seconds of this game. And that, of course, I don't know if you slept through if you Rip Van Winkle, if you didn't watch the game and you've refused to acknowledge social media or the news this morning or today, you may be unaware. I don't know how you could possibly be, but you got a guy in Myles Garrett who takes off a guy's helmet and then hits him in the head with it, and not a light little let me just bump you in the head with this, a full overhand swing to kind of attempt to smash the helmet down on the guy's completely exposed head, that guy being Mason Rudolph. I've said this, I got into No, go ahead.
You jumped the shark on me. I wanted to talk about this whole drive that Browns fans were complaining the referees gave the game to the Steelers to give them 7 points, and in all intents and purposes, they did drag the Steelers offense over the goal line with all of the different stuff. But, I mean, you headhunted Deontay Johnson. What else do you want there? Then, Ogunjobi basically has his fists up inside Ramon Foster's face mask for illegal use of hands. There was 3rd and 1. They almost shot themselves in the foot again. You had a false start on Matt Filer, and I'm just like, come on, guys, you're not doing any favors for how bad this offense is. And we talked about a lot of offensive penalties and things that shot the Steelers in the foot. There was a game last year. It was very much the same way, where it was 1 step forward, 2 steps back, and I'd have to remember what it was, but it was very ugly, and there was a lot of the same storylines that are coming out of this. But then you had the one where you actually get a defensive pass interference call that was called in favor of Johnny Holton was targeted for 38 yards. Mason Rudolph finds Jalen Samuels on the little dump off, which I was just screaming. I'm like, he's there, just turn your head, and he finds him finally, and they get on the board, and I'm like, a lot of Browns fans, you hear them booing in the stadium and stuff, and it was like, you can't even argue anything that was called on that entire drive. Every single thing that was there was there. Unfortunately, it's when you get back around, the Browns have this drive. Siebert misses another field goal. You have another bad drive by the Steelers. They get a first down, and then they're basically 3 and out after that first down. Steelers defense forces another 3 and out. So does the Cleveland Browns defense, and so on and so forth. But there were some of these passes here you still felt like the Steelers were in this because it was 14-7, and there was a drive here where Mason Rudolph tries to find Johnny Holton a couple of times. He had one that was deep. It was 3rd and 1, and Tomlin decides to go for it. And then he couldn't find the 4th and 1 play was just a complete cluster. And people are like, well, why didn't they just run the ball? I have no idea, because sometimes it doesn't always work. I don't know. You had a QB sneak that we didn't see coming necessarily either when it was very predictable play calling. And they just didn't get it done there. But there was still a 3 and out forced by the Steelers defense. And then that's when he goes deep to Holton again. And we had to bring up the ref's stink before we bring up trying to crater someone's head with their own helmet, because Johnny Holton was legitimately had his arm pinned, held, and grabbed on both of these. And the reason this ticks me off, Brian, and I know it's spilled milk because they still, Mason goes out there and throws the pick not long after this on, 1st and 10 from their own 9. Just gifts them the field position and the football and pretty much puts a nail in the coffin when they still had an opportunity to win a very ugly game at that point by both offenses completely. And even more so the Steelers and the Browns. At least the Browns were picking up a first down here or there, much to my chagrin. But I'm just kind of like, if you're going to call Deontay Johnson for some of these things, or the Terrell Edmunds overturned call that I'm still going to hang my hat on from earlier in the year with the Seahawks, how can you not call that? You said something about not wanting to give the game away by just throwing a bunch of flags in favor of the same guy. But that was the matchup where they couldn't cover. That's the one thing Johnny Holton is good at. He could run fast, and he runs faster than the other guy, and he has to grab him in order to harass him and make sure he doesn't catch the ball. He nearly comes down with it, and there was a point here. It was 3rd and 1, right after the deep pass to Johnny Holton. This was with 13:35 left in the 4th quarter, or in the game. Mike Tomlin calls a timeout. This is where I had a problem. Now, Mike Tomlin had his challenge. He won another challenge. That's one positive thing you could say about this game. Why doesn't he throw the challenge flag here? I understand he might need it again later, when it gets down to 2 minutes. So you essentially have 11 minutes of game clock where you might need another challenge. But he was already successful in one, so he has another one in his pocket. It's not like he has the 2, he was unsuccessful, he only has one more to burn. If you're going to call a timeout, throwing the challenge flag, if you're not successful, you lose a timeout, right? So what's the difference here? Why doesn't he just throw the challenge flag, and then essentially they have the timeout and they review it. And if they see something or they don't see something, at least, you have it on film and we could complain about it a little more from different camera angles. And you're fighting for your team and you may have the ball down at the 1 with an opportunity to tie the game. Instead, by not making this decision, possession changes, and then eventually you get down to 6:32 in the game, and Mason makes a very bad decision with the football, the worst decision he made in the entire game, in my opinion. Once again, Schobert ends up with the football. He was trying to find James Washington, really the only guy that was still left on the roster who could play at the wide receiver position, and then that was it. I mean, it was basically, the Steelers were still kind of holding the fort there too, because there was an incomplete pass to Beckham. Nick Chubb lost 4 yards from Tyson Alualu. But then Carlson, his first and only catch of the season for a touchdown on Mark Barron's helmet. If Mark Barron was if he was an inch taller, it's an incomplete pass. If he turns around, it's probably an incomplete pass. You want to talk about luck? I understand Siebert's probably going to, at least at the worst, kick a field goal there, and they're going to go up 10, and it's a 2-possession game. But that was just the heartbreaker for me.
Yeah, look, Mark Barron is bad in coverage. Let's just put it that way. That was all you got to do is turn your head around, and I get it. He's probably manned up, and if you're not aware, when you're manned up, your head is not pointed towards the quarterback; it's at the guy you're covering. But you got to get your head around. The ball literally hit him in the head, and the guy makes the catch over top of him. You turn around, and at least you can get your hands up. You can knock that ball away, whatever it may be. I am not at this point. Mark Barron shouldn't be on the field. It should be Vince Williams. I mean, Vince Williams and Devin Bush are a better tandem than Mark Barron and Devin Bush. And he has proved to be a liability in coverage. He bounces off of guys when he tries to tackle them. He did make one good play in the game, but it's overshadowed by the bad plays, and I can't even remember it now.
Yeah.
So
I know.
I had a lot of hopes for Mark Barron, when they signed him, but it has not panned out very well. I'm not sure that it's at the level of Bostic, but it's getting there. And I will say this, until Morgan Burnett went out, I tweeted this last night, and I feel like compelled that I have to say this. Morgan Burnett was playing like Mike Tomlin slept with his wife.
Yes, I thought that was a great tweet, by the way, and I totally agree with you on that. And I just wanted to jump ahead to the series the Steelers had right after Cleveland goes up 21-7. This was there was a delay of game. And you go to third and 15. They were actually moving the ball okay. Vance McDonald being involved was kind of somewhat positive, but he goes to look for him again after Johnny Holton catches his only pass for 18 yards, and we get an actual first down out of this. He looks for Vance McDonald, and this was just forcing the ball. At this point, you're throwing it around. I honestly don't even care. I really don't care about it. I don't care what anybody has to say about that. But at that point, does it really matter? They're down 14. They're just trying to generate something. I don't even get upset over it. I really don't. I mean, what else are you going to do at that point? You have to throw the football. There's 4 minutes left in the game. And you're down 2 scores. You have to do some or try to make something happen, and it just wasn't happening on this particular evening. Now the Steelers defense ends up coming back out. They force a punt. There's a minute and 46 still left. Tomlin did some really good clock management here. This is another thing you don't hear a whole lot of. From Coach T when people are criticizing him. You get the 2-minute warning, and then it's 2nd and 4. So that was one of your timeouts at 2. They use another one at 1:52 and another one at 1:47 and get force a punt, and they take the field at 1:40. Very good clock management there, because the Browns started with 3:54. I know you chewed almost 2 minutes off of there, but by not using maybe the timeouts initially, and they ended up with a first down anyways, you at least put yourself in a position to do something else. Now that something else started to amount to Jalen Samuels getting these little dump-off passes, running out of bounds. Trey Edmonds runs out of bounds. Then all of a sudden it became a sack party. Mason Rudolph gets tagged by Larry Ogunjobi for 10. Schobert comes up basically untouched for 9. I'm like, you're going to get this guy killed. There's 14 seconds left in the game. And, Mason Rudolph completes this one pass to Trey Edmonds. He's standing there in the pocket, gets swung around. This was everything you were just saying. Myles Garrett ends up throwing him, onto the ground, and then he's laying on top of him. Isn't there like a body weight thing that's supposed to be called too? The reason I'm really mad about this, and there wasn't a flag that was thrown for roughing the passer here that should have been. This is complete BS, because you saw what happened with Ola Adeni against Lamar Jackson, and Lamar Jackson fighting and trying to still make something happen because he's more or less mobile. Mason Rudolph isn't mobile, and you're going to give the guy who plays basically, he's a running back, a roughing the passer call, extending the play. You never see Ben ever get those calls. You don't see Mason Rudolph get this call. Now, I'm going to add my touch to this, and we're going to get into this right now. You have what is Myles Garrett? How big is he? 260, 270, 280? Big guy, right?
Yep.
You just got nailed twice. 2 sacks in a row. This is now the third. You got the ball out of your hands, and you're on the ground late, and the guy is on top of you, and you're PO'd because you're already losing the game and you've thrown 4 picks, and now you're kicking and trying to shove this guy off of you, and he doesn't let you go. He doesn't get off of you, and he does not let you go, and then he picks you up by your face mask, rips your helmet off, and then proceeds to use it as a weapon against you, specifically swinging it like a windmill, basketball slam dunk at your cranium. And everybody, all of a sudden, there's some narratives out here that are trying to say, well, Mason Rudolph instigated this. In what way did he instigate this? By just trying to do something and complete a pass at the end of the game and ending up on the ground and then trying to get the guy off of him. Not only this, he completes the pass. If this ball doesn't go out of bounds or anything like that, and you don't have any timeouts and you still think you're trying to do something in garbage time, what do you need to do? You have to get up off the ground and get set to run the next play, and this idiot is laying on top of you. And I'm going to call him an idiot because he's been tagged with fines before. He is a fine player. He's probably the best player on the Browns defense and one of the premier pass rushers in the NFL. But he's an idiot because he has to be smarter than doing this type of stuff that now, a lot of people, and we're talking about some pretty big names. We're not just talking about Pro Football Talk throwing their, normal filth or whatever, their hot take for, retweets and whatnot out there. We're talking about like Peter King, for example, saying Myles Garrett should not play football for the rest of this season and probably longer. An act not seen in decades requires discipline not seen in decades, particularly in these times when the NFL is trying to clean up the game. That is a huge, huge deal coming from a guy who's been around this sport for many, many years as a journalist. And Aditi Kikwala adds this too, just to throw on the thing we're saying about Browns being dirty and whatnot. They're the most penalized team in the NFL with the most penalty yards and the most player ejections. If you really want to fight the narrative that you're an undisciplined bunch and really believe this was inexcusable, don't wait for the league. Suspend Myles Garrett yourself. And, a lot of people are coming to the defense of Pouncey, and I have to too. I would be very hot if that was my teammate. And I'm going to talk about this from the other perspective, too, because I like some things that Baker Mayfield said, too, and some of the other Browns guys. And you can even tell Freddie Kitchens was out there with Mike Tomlin, and they're talking. Freddie Kitchens almost like has his hands in his pocket, and he's kind of like, man, he's shaking his head. He's just like, I don't know, man. I don't know. But, Pouncey, I just hope he didn't break his hand trying to throw a punch at a guy that's wearing a helmet. It reminds me of A.J. Green and Jalen Ramsey. By the way, when those two got in a fight a few years ago, they just got ejected from the game. They got fined. Neither of them were suspended. So if you think Marquise Pouncey is going to get a suspension, or some of you delusional people that are out there, i.e. the Browns fans that are calling for a longer suspension for Pouncey or even a suspension for Rudolph, even in game, I don't even think they throw a flag on Rudolph if this is in the middle of the third quarter and he's just trying to throw him off of him and nothing else comes of it. Let's just say nothing else comes of it. The referees are going to get in the middle and they're just going to say, cool it, right? I don't think they're going to throw a penalty, even a penalty flag at Mason Rudolph for what Mason did, because he didn't do anything. He's just trying to be like, get off of me. You know what I mean? If you've ever been in that position before, you would do the same thing, folks. If you're coming to the defense of a family member, which is, this is football community now, and I think a lot of it is larger than just being teammates. Baker Mayfield after the game, almost speechless. This is a guy that should be happier than, a pig and what, because they just beat the Browns, or the Browns just beat the Steelers as a big win in front of their home crowd, 2 in a row. And he's just kind of like, they ask him about Myles Garrett, and he just, what did he say? He's like, it's inexcusable. There's no place for it. I'm paraphrasing, but a lot of people were like, post-game, they're like, wow, we're surprised Baker said these things. I'm not. Why would you defend a guy like that? You just won 2 games. You're trying to rebound. If you lose any more games, you're out of the playoff picture. You're a team that, a lot of people were looking to be on the upswing this year, potentially be a playoff contender. And now you're going to lose like an all-pro caliber, best defensive player, a guy that's like, should be a locker room leader, et cetera, et cetera. You potentially lose him for several games, if not maybe a historic suspension. Every single guy in the Browns locker room was feeling that. They're mad, not just because of what he did, but because of what he did to their team now going forward, and also their perception and reputation of that team and said locker room.
Yeah, I'm going to start this off by doing what you said and give props to Baker Mayfield. I said this last night on Twitter. I'll say it again. I'm not a Baker Mayfield fan, but I will give him mad respect for coming out and not deflecting and not trying to make excuses, but flat out saying that is unexcusable. He's going to get suspended. We can't do that. He can't do that. And it's not throwing the guy under the bus. The guy threw himself under the bus. Myles Garrett, saw a bus coming, jumped under it, made sure he was under the tires. It's all on him.
He went to the bus garage.
Yeah, and I give Baker absolute credit for doing that. To say otherwise, to say, oh, I'm disappointed in him, he should have had his back, you're maybe sacrificing your human being card. I'm sorry. You're an idiot. You're just an idiot. And I got into it, and again, when you argue with fools, you prove that there are 2 fools in the room. So I kind of backed out of this, but I got a little fed up with folks last night and that narrative you're talking about, which is it's all Mason's fault because he started it. No, go back as you said, go back the step further. Garrett started it. He lands on him. He doesn't get off of him. I have no idea what's being said, but you can guarantee some trash talk is being said, and Mason said, I'm not having it anymore. Now, regardless of what happened next, at no point did anything occur that would warrant ripping the guy's helmet off and then hitting him in the head with it. I mean, I'm sorry. That's to me, that's like saying, okay, you poked me with a stick, so I'm allowed to shoot you in the brain.
Yeah, exactly.
It's insanity. It's just insanity. You talked about potentially. This is why I said this is like a loss for the Browns, because you've got that player, Myles Garrett, who I have no idea what the league is going to do. To be quite honest, as you said, we're recording this the morning after. And it's at a point in time where we should already know what the league is going to do. This isn't something that should have taken a lot of effort on their part. Look, I don't give Roger Goodell for credit for being the smartest guy in the book as far as how to handle certain things. But this should have been a no-brainer, right? It should have been immediate. It's that egregious. When Joe Buck says on TV, "That's the worst thing I've ever seen in a professional game," he's absolutely right.
He said professional sports because he covers more than just the NFL.
Yeah. I mean, he's absolutely right. And people are trying to compare this to when somebody ripped off Richie Cognito's helmet. But he didn't, he swung it at him, but he didn't hit him in the head with it. It's different. And again, you got to watch it. It's not that he made a light swing or a backhanded move. This was like the full overhanded tomahawk chop with the helmet. He was intent on doing damage to another human being. And when you take into account...
Wait a minute. Big word. Intent. It was deliberate. Like intent, absolutely. I think you have to be a mind reader. This was deliberately dirty.
He tempted to say it was an accident. That's not an accident. You aimed.
Yes.
You can't accidentally aim at someone's head. You do that on purpose. And there is absolute intent there. And you can't do that. If people understand, an NFL helmet weighs 6 pounds, okay? Mm-hmm. People have been killed with rocks and stones that weigh 2 or 3 pounds. If that helmet hits Mason Rudolph, even on the top of the head with the crown, you're talking potentially severe damage. If it hits him in the temple, he's dead. It's not... You go to jail for this crap in real life. And while I don't know, although Mason Rudolph's agent is claiming that they're going to investigate all potential options, there's a certain level of protection that exists on the football field. People have questioned that at times, but this is after the play, far after the play. This is taking a piece of equipment, using it as a weapon. I said this last night. Anything less than the remainder of the year to me is an injustice. And I wouldn't rule out saying, you know what, you're done forever, because it's just that egregious. It's such a bad look. And, for people who want to say, well, when you're being attacked, you have every right to defend yourself in whatever way is necessary. Go back into your caves. That's insanity in this kind of an instance. At no point was Myles Garrett in danger of his life that he needed to assault another human being in a fashion that could have ended their life. It was the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen in a professional game. The worst loss of control by an athlete who, in all honesty, should have been able to laugh anything off because you're winning.
Yeah.
You're winning the game, and it would not matter to me what was said. I don't care if Mason Rudolph kicked him in the nuts. I don't care. None of that warrants what he ended up doing. You want to try and punch him? Guess what? I'm okay with that. But you try and hit him in the head with a helmet? I'm sorry, that's assault. And if the league does anything mediocre on this, that their narrative of player safety just goes right out the window.
It really does, Brian, and we're well past it, and there's still probably more we can say. But once again, I'll remind people to keep it cool in the comments. I do want to make one kind of comment because it happened with one of our guys being called, the R word because it's an African American gentleman and a white gentleman. I don't know if I could use the word gentleman in this case just based on, you grabbed a weapon. You know what I mean? That's what you're saying. It's not just a punch. This was a weapon used as a weapon. Keep that in mind. That's the action. Keep the rest of the stuff out of it. It's just not worth even throwing out there. You usually get the Browns comments that still bring up Ben Roethlisberger and things that happened years ago. Keep it classy, folks. You have Kareem Hunt, too, on your roster. I'm just going to say that as well. So if you're going to celebrate that or whatever, with this Myles Garrett thing or defend him, multiple games, rest of the season. I think the punishment has to fit the crime. I would actually be surprised if Marquise Pouncey for retaliation. If he got a game, it wouldn't surprise me. If he got anything more than that, it would. I think just based on, the AJ Green and Jalen Ramsey thing, they got thrown out in the second quarter, so they kind of worse, partially suspended. This happens at the end of the game, so Pouncey may be seeing at least a game too instead of just a fine, just to kind of maybe explain that. And I'm sure we're going to have all of this information when we reconvene, Brian, sometime earlier next week during the mini bye, and we'll have more to say about that. We got some things to say about the Steelers going forward. We're going to look at the schedule. We're going to look at some of the other changes that happened, not only with the roster but coaching that I think is influencing what's going on the field too. But alas, we don't have time to do that. A little bit of extra bonus coverage because of Mr. Garrett. So thank you once again for joining me today.
Absolutely. And may you have someone who has your back the way Marquise Pouncey has Mason's back.
Man, when he talks about the locker room being family, he wasn't kidding, was he? And DeCastro was trying to play peacemaker through the whole thing. Not only is he trying to pull Garrett out of it, he like lays on top of him like it's a grenade and just to make sure, because he's basically like he's holding him down, and he was like, because if you don't I don't know what else, that might be a full out brawl with more players involved. And you
Absolutely.
had what was it? Ogunjobi comes up. And he gets disqualified. He ends up shoving Mason down to the ground after the fact. So Pouncey got disqualified. Garrett got disqualified. Ogunjobi gets disqualified. Mason looks up from the ground. He says a B word at him that's a 5-letter swear word and rhymes with itch. And you could lip read it. And it's just kind of like, yeah, that was kind of a cheap shot too. So I don't know what you're thinking. But folks, don't forget to like and subscribe if you dare to comment. Just letting you know, keep it clean once again. So my name's Joe, his name's Brian. Until next time, we encourage everyone to be safe, be good, and we'll catch you later.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.